Here, in the vast ecosystem of human endeavor, we find individuals whose impact resonates long after their time. Steve Jobs, a name synonymous with innovation, was indeed a business magnate of extraordinary vision. He was a pioneer who, with an almost preternatural ability, foresaw the technological landscapes of our future. The personal computer, the intimate connection with our devices, the very way we communicate through sleek, intuitive phones, these revolutions bear his indelible mark. He co-founded Apple, guiding it to become the first company to breach the staggering valuation of over $1 trillion, a testament to his relentless drive and unique perspective on what technology could achieve for humanity. Yet, the gleaming edifice of such monumental success often obscures the foundations upon which it is built. We see the icon, the figurehead of human progress, but what of the unseen struggles, the formidable currents he had to navigate? The path to such heights is rarely a gentle incline, more often it is a treacherous climb, fraught with obstacles that test the very limits of one's endurance and resolve. What were these challenges, these moments of profound adversity that Steve Jobs encountered, which could have so easily diverted his course or extinguished his brilliant spark? In our exploration today, we shall delve into these less trodden paths of his remarkable life. We will uncover the significant obstacles he faced, from the earliest days of his existence to the zenith of his career and beyond. More importantly, we will examine the extraordinary ways in which he confronted and overcame these adversities. For within his story, within the narrative of his resilience and ingenuity, lie profound lessons. Lessons not just for aspiring innovators or entrepreneurs, but for all of us, as we seek to understand the intricate dance between challenge and triumph in the human experience, and find our own purpose in this complex world. The narrative of any life begins, of course, at birth, and for Steve Jobs, this very genesis was marked by uncertainty, a prelude to a life less ordinary. He was born to a young, unwed graduate student, Joanne Schiebel, who found herself in a precarious position. In an era perhaps less forgiving, the societal pressures and personal circumstances surrounding her pregnancy were immense. She made the profoundly difficult decision that her child might find a better start, a more stable environment, if placed for adoption. This was not a decision born of indifference, but one can imagine, of deep, heartfelt consideration for the future of the life she carried. This early chapter, this unchosen path, set a unique stage. The very fabric of his beginnings was woven with threads of relinquishment and the hope for something more. His biological mother had a specific wish for her son, that he be adopted by college graduates. It speaks of her aspirations for him, a desire for him to have opportunities that perhaps she felt she couldn't provide at that moment. A lawyer and his wife were initially selected, a seemingly perfect match to her criteria. Yet life, in its unpredictable way, had another plan. They, it turned out, desired a girl, and so, at the last moment, the arrangement shifted quite unexpectedly. The call then went to another couple on the waiting list, Paul and Clara Jobs. They were not college graduates. Paul was a high school dropout, a machinist, and Clara, a bookkeeper. This was a significant deviation from the biological mother's initial stipulation. One can only imagine the apprehension, the hesitation. Indeed, Joanne Schiebel initially refused to sign the final adoption papers, a poignant moment of maternal concern. It was only after Paul and Clara promised unequivocally that the child would attend college that she relented. This promise, made at the dawn of his life, would echo with a certain irony in the years to come. To be set adrift, in a sense, from one's biological roots, even into the most loving of adoptive homes, can leave an indelible mark on the nascent psyche. While the Jobs family provided a nurturing environment, the underlying knowledge of being chosen, yet also given away, is a complex emotional landscape for any child to navigate. Questions of identity, of belonging, of why often simmer beneath the surface, sometimes consciously, sometimes in the deeper, less accessible realms of the self. This was the subtle, pervasive undercurrent of his early years, a silent companion to his upbringing. This foundational experience, this early brush with a fate not of his own making, could have manifested in countless ways. For some, such beginnings might lead to a sense of insecurity or a lifelong search for validation. For Steve, one might speculate that it perhaps instilled a profound, almost primal need to make his mark, to prove his worth, or perhaps to control his destiny in ways he could not control his origins. It may have forged an early understanding that life's circumstances are not always as they seem, and that resilience is not merely a virtue, but a necessity for survival and growth. Thus, from the very outset, from the moment of his birth and adoption, Steve Jobs was, in a way, set to struggle, not necessarily for material survival but for a sense of place, for an understanding of his own narrative. This early trauma, this fundamental question of belonging, may well have been the unseen crucible in which his fierce independence, his unconventional thinking, and his relentless drive to shape the world around him were first forged. It was an obstacle, yes, but perhaps also the very bedrock upon which his extraordinary capacity for innovation and his unwavering determination would later be built. The promise made at his adoption, that he would attend college, eventually led Steve Jobs to the hallowed halls of Reed College in Portland, Oregon. It was a prestigious liberal arts institution, known for its demanding curriculum and, at times, its countercultural leanings. For many, this would be the anticipated next step, a clear pathway towards a defined future. Yet, for Steve, the structured environment of higher education, with its prescribed courses and traditional methodologies, soon began to feel less like an opportunity and more like a beautifully gilded cage, one that was rapidly depleting his adoptive parents' modest life savings. He found himself adrift, not in a sea of knowledge but in a fog of uncertainty. "I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life," he would later reflect, a sentiment that resonates with many young individuals facing the vast expanse of their future. Crucially, he also confessed, "and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out." This wasn't an indictment of Reed College itself, but rather a deeply personal realization that the conventional path, the one so earnestly promised for him, was perhaps not his path at all. The financial burden he felt he was placing on his working-class parents weighed heavily upon him. After a mere 6 months, a remarkably short tenure, he made the courageous, some might say, reckless, decision to drop out. This was not an act of rebellion born of apathy, but rather a profound, intuitive step towards an unknown alternative. He chose to trust his curiosity, his intuition, even though it led him away from the well-trodden road. He stopped taking the required classes, the ones that felt meaningless to him, and instead began to drop in on those that piqued his interest, that sparked a flicker of genuine engagement within his restless mind. This was a period of intellectual exploration, unconstrained by credits or degrees. One such class, almost serendipitously, was calligraphy. At the time, it must have seemed like an esoteric, impractical pursuit, far removed from any conventional career trajectory. He was captivated by the beauty of serif and sans serif typefaces, by the intricate spacing between letter combinations, by the artistry of typography. He learned about what makes great typography great. This immersion in the aesthetic principles of lettering had no discernible practical application in his life at that moment. It was learning for learning's sake, driven purely by fascination, a stark contrast to the goal-oriented education he had just abandoned. This period of unofficial learning was also one of considerable personal hardship. Without the structure of formal enrollment, resources were scarce. He famously recounted sleeping on the floor in friends' dorm rooms, a nomadic existence sustained by camaraderie. He would return Coca-Cola bottles for the 5-cent deposits, a meager sum that often constituted his food budget for the day. He would walk 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. This was a life stripped bare, a testament to his commitment to following an inner calling, however unclear its destination. Yet it was precisely this unconventional detour, this period of seemingly aimless wandering and focused curiosity, that would later prove to be profoundly influential. Years later, when designing the first Macintosh computer, the knowledge gleaned from that calligraphy class came flooding back. The Mac was revolutionary for many reasons, but one of its defining features was its beautiful typography, its multiple typefaces, and proportionally spaced fonts. Had he never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac, and indeed personal computers as we know them, might have looked and felt very different. The obstacle of a dissatisfying education became the fertile ground for a future innovation. The journey from a suburban garage to the global stage is the stuff of legend, and for Steve Jobs, this was a reality he co-created with astonishing speed and impact. Alongside his friend Steve Wozniak, he ignited the spark that would become Apple Computer. In that humble garage with limited resources but boundless ingenuity and ambition, they laid the groundwork for a company that would redefine industries. The early days were marked by a fervent, almost missionary zeal, a belief that they could put a dent in the universe by making powerful tools accessible to everyday people. It was a period of intense creativity and camaraderie. Over the span of a mere decade, this fledgling enterprise, nurtured by Jobs' visionary marketing and Wozniak's engineering prowess, grew at an almost unbelievable rate. From a two-man operation, Apple burgeoned into a colossal entity, a company valued at over $2 billion, employing thousands. It was a staggering ascent, a testament to their ability to tap into the zeitgeist, to anticipate and shape consumer desires. Jobs was the charismatic frontman, the driving force, the one who imbued their products with an almost magical allure. He was, by all appearances, at the pinnacle of his own creation. However, the very success that Apple achieved began to breed complexities and internal frictions. As the company grew, so too did the corporate structures, the boardroom politics, and the differing visions for its future. Jobs, known for his demanding nature, his uncompromising standards, and his sometimes abrasive style, found himself increasingly at odds with the very people he had brought in to help manage the burgeoning empire. A pivotal moment came with the hiring of John Sculley, a seasoned executive from PepsiCo, whom Jobs himself had famously wooed with the challenge. "Do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world?" The irony would prove to be profound and painful. The man he had personally recruited, the experienced hand he believed Apple needed, would ultimately preside over his ousting. In 1985, following a period of declining sales for the Macintosh and increasing internal strife over the company's direction, the board of directors, siding with Sculley, made the unthinkable decision. Steve Jobs was effectively fired from Apple, the company he had poured his heart and soul into, the company that was inextricably linked with his very identity. It was a public and deeply personal humiliation. The experience was, by his own admission, devastating. "I was out, and very publicly out," he later stated. "What had been the focus of my entire adult life was gone, and it was devastating." For a time he felt like a failure, like he had let down the previous generation of entrepreneurs. The weight of this expulsion from his own kingdom was immense. The world watched as the visionary was cast into the wilderness. It was an obstacle of such magnitude that it could have easily crushed a lesser spirit, consigning him to the footnotes of tech history as a brilliant but ultimately tragic figure. Yet this period of exile, these wilderness years, proved to be unexpectedly fertile. The initial pain and public ignominy gave way to a period of reflection, and eventually, a renewed creative surge. Freed from the immense pressures and constraints of running Apple, he found a new lightness. He realized he still loved what he did. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. This perspective allowed him to enter one of the most creative periods of his life, leading to the founding of Next, a company focused on powerful workstations, and perhaps most significantly, the acquisition and development of Pixar, which would go on to revolutionize animated filmmaking. The obstacle of being fired, in a strange twist of fate, became a catalyst for rebirth and further innovation. Even as Steve Jobs orchestrated his triumphant return to Apple in the late 1990s, ushering in an era of unprecedented innovation with the iMac, iPod, iPhone and iPad, an altogether different, more insidious obstacle was quietly gathering strength within him. In 2003, during a routine abdominal scan, doctors discovered a shadow on his pancreas. Further investigation in 2004 delivered a chilling diagnosis: pancreatic cancer. This particular form of cancer is notoriously aggressive and often carries a grim prognosis, a formidable adversary that strikes fear into the hearts of those who receive its name. The initial assessment from his physicians was stark and deeply unsettling. They informed him that the type of tumor they believed he had was almost certainly incurable. He was given a life expectancy of merely 3 to 6 months. One can scarcely imagine the weight of such words, the sudden, brutal confrontation with one's own mortality. For a man so driven, so accustomed to shaping his reality, this was a decree from a power beyond his control. The future, once a canvas for his boundless imagination, now seemed to have an imminent, unyielding deadline. He was advised to go home and get his affairs in order, the standard somber counsel for those facing such a dire outlook. However, later that same evening, a biopsy revealed a crucial, life-altering detail. The tumor was not the common aggressive adenocarcinoma of the pancreas they had initially suspected. Instead, it was a very rare form of pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor, often referred to as an islet cell tumor. This distinction was monumental. Unlike its more common counterpart, This type of tumor is often slow-growing and, most importantly, potentially operable. What had seemed like an insurmountable wall, a definitive end, now presented a narrow, precarious path towards a chance, however slim, of survival. Hope, which had been all but extinguished, flickered back to life. He underwent a successful surgery, a pancreatic duodenectomy, often known as a Whipple procedure. In July 2004, the tumor was removed, and for a time, it seemed as though he had stared death in the face and emerged victorious. He returned to Apple with renewed vigor, though the experience had undoubtedly left an indelible mark on his perspective. He spoke more openly about life and death, most notably in his famous 2005 Stanford University commencement address, where he reflected on his cancer diagnosis as the closest he'd been to facing death, and how it had clarified his priorities. Despite the initial success of the surgery, the shadow of illness was to be a persistent companion in his remaining years. His health struggles were not entirely vanquished. In 2009, he took another leave of absence from Apple, this time for a liver transplant, a consequence of the spread of the neuroendocrine tumor. His gaunt appearance and subsequent public appearances told a silent story of an ongoing, arduous battle being waged within. Each product launch, each keynote address, was delivered with his characteristic passion, but often against a backdrop of visible physical decline. This protracted confrontation with his own failing health was perhaps the ultimate obstacle. It was a relentless, deeply personal struggle that played out on a very public stage. Yet, even in the face of this formidable foe, his drive to innovate, to create, to leave his mark, seemed only to intensify. The awareness of his limited time, rather than paralyzing him, appeared to fuel an even greater urgency to bring his visions to fruition. His health problems were a constant reminder of life's fragility, but also, paradoxically, a powerful motivator to live each moment with purpose, and to continue pushing the boundaries of what was possible, right until the very end of his extraordinary journey. In reflecting upon the tapestry of Steve Jobs' life, it becomes abundantly clear that he was far more than just a brilliant technologist or a shrewd businessman. He was, in a very real sense, an architect of the modern age, a man whose vision and tenacity profoundly shaped a vast majority of the technological world we inhabit today. The sleek devices in our pockets, the intuitive interfaces on our screens, the very way we access information and connect with one another. So much of this bears the imprint of his relentless pursuit of simplicity, elegance, and user-centric design. His influence is woven into the daily fabric of countless lives across the globe. But beyond the celebrated innovations and the staggering financial success of Apple, there lies the equally compelling story of a human being who faced and surmounted a series of profound personal and professional setbacks. From the complexities of his birth and adoption, through the uncertainty of dropping out of college, the public humiliation of being fired from the company he co-founded, to the ultimate battle with a life-threatening illness. His journey was one punctuated by formidable obstacles. It is in his responses to these adversities, his refusal to be defined by them, that we find perhaps his most enduring lessons in resilience and the power of an unwavering spirit. His words, often shared with a raw honesty, particularly in his later years, resonate with a timeless wisdom. They speak of passion, of intuition, of not settling, and of the importance of finding what you love. "Your time is limited," he famously said, "so don't waste it living someone else's life." These are not mere platitudes, but insights forged in the crucible of lived experience, of triumphs hard-won and challenges bravely faced. His words of wisdom, born from a life of extraordinary peaks and valleys, are ones that everyone, regardless of their path, should consider when wanting to discover what purpose their life truly holds in this vast and wondrous world.